Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where AI hype meets cost curves, incentives, and the fine print. A lot of AI conversation still sounds like compute is infinite. Models keep getting smarter for free, and every new product tier is just upside. The more interesting story is tighter than that. Tokens are getting expensive, architecture choices suddenly matter, and governments and capital markets are starting to treat AI labs less like software startups and more like strategic infrastructure. The biggest shift here is from a token subsidy era to a token efficiency era. For a while, the market behaved as if model usage could be abstracted away behind flat pricing, generous allowances, and startup-style burn. That works when providers are willing to eat margin to gain share. It stops working when tokens are treated as a genuinely scarce input. The evidence in the source material points in that direction. Per-token billing is replacing the illusion of unlimited access, and large companies like Uber and Walmart are reportedly imposing monthly AI usage caps on employees. That matters because enterprise demand is finally colliding with operational reality. If usage gets capped internally, that usually means somebody has already seen the bill and decided the old habits don't scale. The stronger claim is that this shortage could last for years, with TSMC and others warning it isn't just a short spike. If that's right, then efficient AI use isn't a temporary optimization project. It's a durable management problem. There is still uncertainty here. A shortage can come from model demand, chip bottlenecks, power constraints, or simply aggressive growth forecasts. Any one of those can ease faster than expected, but even if the timeline is fuzzy, the direction of travel is pretty well supported. Second-order effect. Companies get pushed towards smaller models, less context, more guardrails on prompts, and a lot more scrutiny of whether every workflow actually needs a frontier model in the loop. That also changes what good AI adoption looks like. It's not just buying seats, it's routing, context management, and eliminating redundant token burn across teams. The training point is easy to underrate. If staff aren't taught when to use a cheap model, when to trim context, or how to avoid rerunning the same expensive chain, ROI can collapse even if the underlying model is excellent. For solo operators, the implication is similar but more personal. Lightweight context systems and reusable workflows built now could become a real edge later, because efficiency compounds when budgets tighten. Once tokens are scarce, model routing stops sounding like an engineering nicety and starts looking like basic financial hygiene. The claim here is that native routing systems can automatically choose between models, including cheaper non-frontier options, while preserving performance and cutting costs by roughly 25%. That number will vary by workload, so it shouldn't be treated as universal, but the underlying logic is solid. Many tasks do not need the most expensive model, and humans are bad at manually making that call consistently. This is where architecture beats policy. A usage cap tells people to spend less. Routing systems actually enforce a smarter spend pattern. Hybrid inference pushes the same idea further. If some work can happen on-device and only harder queries go to the cloud, you can reduce cost, improve privacy, and sometimes lower latency too. The trade-off is complexity. Local plus cloud sounds elegant, but it creates more moving parts, more failure modes, and new questions about what data lives where. The Harvey and Fireworks example is interesting because it suggests a layered labor model for AI systems. An open-weight worker handles routine domain work, then escalates only the hard pieces to a closed frontier model. If that works well in legal, it says something broader. The most valuable enterprise architecture may not be one great model. It may be a hierarchy of models with different costs, strengths, and trust boundaries. The Microsoft and McKinsey point sharpens that further. If domain-specific post-training can get you near frontier performance at around 1/10 the cost, then general intelligence isn't always the procurement target. Task fit is. That doesn't mean frontier labs become irrelevant. It means the value may increasingly sit in adaptation, routing, and system design rather than raw model access alone. The codex updates matter less as flashy features and more as a clue about where practical AI work is heading. Functional plugins tied to common SaaS tools suggest role-specific automation is getting packaged at the workflow level rather than the chatbot level. That's usually when adoption gets stickier because it plugs into what people already do. The more provocative feature is Sites, which can reportedly turn a document or web page into a live website or web app with one click. If that holds up in practice, the conceptual shift is that websites become first-class units of knowledge work, not just publishing surfaces. A source can become an interface. The obvious caution is quality control. One-click generation tends to compress the distance between source material and output, which is powerful, but it can also make errors, stale content, or hidden assumptions travel faster. The public ownership discussion is still politically fluid, but the signal is hard to ignore. Bernie Sanders proposing 50% government ownership of major AI labs is a very strong version of the idea. Reports that the Trump administration is considering equity stakes point to something different but related bipartisan interest in treating leading AI firms as strategically important assets. Those are not the same policy. Full public ownership, partial stakes, golden shares, and sovereign-style investment all create different incentives. But they all raise the same core questions. Who captures the upside? Who gets visibility into the technology? And how do regulation and ownership interact when the regulator may also be an investor? Supporters will argue that if AI becomes infrastructure-like, the public should share in both returns and governance. Critics will worry about politicized research, distorted competition, and blurred lines between oversight and control. The strongest conclusion for now is not that a specific ownership model is coming, it's that AI labs are increasingly being viewed through an industrial policy lens rather than a normal venture capital lens. This is the topic where the gap between early signal and public narrative matters most. The source says policy papers from Anthropic and OpenAI report early indications of recursive self-improvement, meaning systems that participate in feedback loops which accelerate future capability growth. Early indications are not proof of runaway dynamics. They do justify attention, especially because small compounding effects can matter long before they look dramatic. The risk here is two bad reactions in opposite directions. One is panic, where every efficiency gain gets framed as the start of an uncontrollable takeoff. The other is dismissal, where anything short of science fiction behavior gets waved away. The balanced reading is that if labs themselves are documenting early recursive effects, policymakers will likely treat that as a reason for more scrutiny. Whether the underlying phenomenon is transformative or merely incremental is still unresolved. The SpaceX IPO matters beyond space. If it becomes the largest IPO in history, investors will read it as a referendum on appetite for high growth, technically ambitious companies with AI adjacency and infrastructure scale narratives. That doesn't mean one offering can tell us what AI is worth. SpaceX has unique assets, brand power, and market position. It's not a clean proxy for the broader AI sector. Still, markets use landmarks, and this will be one. A hot reception could loosen risk tolerance and support richer valuations across adjacent companies. A weaker reception could do the opposite, especially for firms priced on future dominance rather than current cash flow. In other words, even if SpaceX isn't an AI company in the narrow sense, its IPO could influence how generously capital markets fund the next wave of AI-scale bets. The through line today is pretty simple. Intelligence isn't getting priced like a novelty anymore. It's getting priced like a constrained input with political and financial consequences. Thanks for listening to Podkey Slopcast. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.